Today, we'll run through two different areas where the free market is trying to fix up a disaster created by government intervention. The first is the Postal Service. We all know that FedEx or UPS does a far more efficient job than the US Postal Service. Even more exciting, if the USPS was sold off, it may introduce a third private solution to mail and package delivery, introducing more competition and driving prices even lower. We all understand how this industry works, so I won't discuss it much other than to say it is an interesting observation at just how long these replaced and inefficient institutions linger, sucking resources from the economy even after they are replaced. Any business would have shut its doors years ago, but if you're spending other people's money to keep this inefficient industry afloat, then there's no need to shut it down. In fact, a congressperson can get a few cheap votes by campaigning to keep the employees of this inefficient industry employed at the expense of everyone else. This is so common in politics because the postal worker may change their vote based on keeping their job or not, but the millions of taxpayers will not notice the couple of dollars missing from their paycheck at the end of the year. Here's one congresswoman banking on that exact strategy. This is her argument for why money should be taken from everyone to keep this one particular inefficient branch open.
United in opposition to the proposed elimination of the Postal Processing and Distribution Center in Buffalo and the 700 jobs of people that are currently employed there. Now, I understand the Postal Service is going through some tough times. They need to make some hard decisions. But up in our neck of the woods, 700 jobs is a very big deal. That's 700 families making mortgage payments, 700 families making their car payments, and 700 families that are able to make their tuition payments.
It is even better if you can steal money from people not in your district and give it to people in your district who get to vote for you. But what's a couple of dollars out of each of our pocket, you ask? Well, apart from being a blatant theft and immoral, this one incident by itself is not society destroying you, right? The problem occurs when millions of these so-called little thefts are stacked up on top of each other. Once the principle is granted, there's no going back. If it was worth being immoral for these 700 people, then why not the next 700? After all, they need their money too, and they contributed to these 700, so really society owes them. It is this perversion of logic that cripples socialist societies as money flows to those who have political power instead of those who provide value. In a free market or voluntary society, the only socially acceptable way to become wealthy is to provide value to the community so that they voluntarily give you money in exchange for your product or service. This is both moral and great for society, as every transaction is a win-win for both parties. However, in a society where a gargantuan government has the socially accepted right to take your money by force, and it is force, by the way, some people, especially the politicians doing the robbery, argue that taxes are not force or violence, but in fact voluntary. Do yourself a favor and hold your jaw up now as you listen to this stupidity.
If the government is in the business of forcefully taking money from some people in order to provide welfare benefits to others, how will the people whose money is being taken feel about the government?
Well, I don't accept your phraseology. I don't think we force people.
Taxation is not forceful?
Well, no.
It's voluntary?
In fact, quite to the contrary. Our system of government is a voluntary tax system.
Oh, if you don't want to pay your taxes, you don't have to?
Oh, of course you have to pay your taxes. But
well, the government will force you to pay, or they'll fine you or imprison you.
We have a voluntary system.
But I want to investigate your thinking a little bit. Do you think it's morally wrong to initiate physical force against someone who hasn't violated anybody's rights?
What are you talking about?
To use force to take their money or their property, if they haven't violated anybody's rights.
What force are you talking about? Give me an example of force.
Well, when you tax somebody, you forcefully extract their money, right? Are taxes voluntary?
Yeah, you don't have to pay them.
Really?
You don't have to pay them.
If you don't pay your taxes,
you go to jail.
Right.
You weigh that.
So
there's a cause and effect.
You think that they're voluntary? You think taxes are voluntary?
Everything in life is voluntary. You
really?
don't have to do it. If you're true libertarian, you don't have to do anything since the government said it.
Well, let me ask you a question.
If you're willing to pay the consequence.
If an armed robber puts a gun to your head and says, "Give me your wallet,"
I don't have to give it to them.
And you give it to him, have you given it to him voluntarily?
Yeah, because I don't have to give it to him.
Let's destroy that line of thinking right here once and for all. If your child goes to school and a gang of bullies several years older than him threaten to beat him up if he does not hand over his lunch money, would anyone other than a politician argue that this was a voluntary transaction? Would anyone agree that the poor child was not a victim of violence? Would anyone agree that the child did not have his or her lunch money stolen? Of course not. This logic is so perverse it actually makes me sick. It's like talking to a rapist and having him say, well, although I had a knife to her throat, she did voluntarily have sex with me, so really the problem is she's promiscuous. The school bullies easily commit their theft because the child knows full well a violent force will hurt him otherwise. When you pay taxes, you know full well that eventually men with guns will come to your house and put you in prison if you do not send your check at the end of the year. The bully knows he's being a bully. The rapist knows he's being a rapist. But in an amazing display of delusion, the lawmaker who forces you to pay taxes cannot even concede that taxation is force. They could try to argue it is a necessary force because without government, society would crumble or something like that. But these politicians have to have circular arguments and ignore the definitions of words to keep up their delusion. An immoral act of violence does not magically become moral and voluntary because the practice is widespread. Someone wrote down a law, or the threat of violence was so great that punches or bullets were not used. So taxation is force, and in fact, all government activity is force. Their solution to every problem is to tell people how to behave and then to make it clear that anyone who behaves differently will be victims of violence. Returning to our point, in a society where a gargantuan government has the socially accepted right to take your money by force, then the most profitable business to be in is not providing value to the community, it is to achieve political power. The most profitable business is to control the socially accepted practice of theft. The success of the capitalist system, if you can remember back that far, rests on the principle that every interaction must provide a win-win for both parties or the transaction does not take place. If you like this video, remember to share it, like it, and comment below. Next week, we'll look at how government has failed to regulate big business into being socially responsible and how the free market is solving this problem. This is super cool. You're going to love it. See you then.